So a lot of things happen in October. It's the beginning of the season running up to Halloween. We have Orktober on the go when everyone is getting enough of the fill of the green things in life. And also now, to add to that, it is the inaugural Kitbash on the channel from Dungeons to Starships. This is the way I really would love this channel to go. Be a channel for kit bashing, creativity and conversion, and I'd love to have you involved with the making of this channel, not only adding your own ideas to it, but also being the driving factors behind a lot of the builds as we go forwards. And the reason for this video has come about because of some of the community input that I've already had since launching the Patreon for the channel just a few short weeks ago. Now, the idea was to try and come up with an idea for this first video about what we're going to do. And it came about after our last interview with Mr. Graham Davies from Grave and Nav Games. And we talked about in that video about origin stories, about his origin story, and it became quite clear that his tale about how he got into wargaming is shared by quite a lot of people, and it's the route that a lot of people came in through role-playing games. Now, I've always found that it's probably one of the hardest models to get hold of would be a model that would represent your character on the tabletop should you need to play with models for the games that you play, or you just want something that you can put on the table that just will give you an idea about, you know, the flavour and the idea that your character is sporting for your games. Now, there are such things as Hero Forge, where we've got the ability to 3D design and get then STL files or printed models, but in my mind they've never quite hit the right level that I wanted for a model for one of my games. So this is what we're going to attempt to do in this initial video. We're going to start from the pre-concept. It's a game that I've never played before, so we're just going to run through the character creation, and then we're going to see what we can come up with. So what game to choose? Well, realistically, we want to tie it into this month, don't we? And we want something that's going to have an October feel, or more importantly, an Orktober feel. Now, one of the standout indie games that's come to market, especially in terms of RPG, has been Orc Borg. I'm sure a lot of people will have seen the nice, brightly yellow cover book available at various shows, etc., and I've seen some like videos from people like friend of the channel Sam Lenz doing kit bashes and monsters and hero models for the game himself. Now, off that, there's been a number of offshoots, but the one that we're going to use for this episode is written by Mr. Grant Howitt and the aforementioned Orc Borg. Now, Orc Borg itself is a standalone game. You don't need a copy of Orc Borg to be able to play this. You can just play it out of this shoot-off document that's available from places like Drive-Thru RPG. But I was lucky enough to pick up a hardback copy when I visited Forbidden Planet a few weeks ago with my small amount of birthday money to treat myself to something that I'd like. So this is the game that we're going to use to base our RPG character on. Now, I like there to be a level of randomness to my build. Now, that doesn't mean that for a lot of times I won't come up with ideas of things that I want to create and sit down with a sketchbook and try and really to iron out all the pieces I'm going to use and come up with all the bits of the design. But I do like now and again there to be a random plot in there about the choices that we have to make. And we're going to deal with it, so like a lot more of those random rolling on tables games to find out bits and pieces about our models and our characters in future videos as well. But Orc Borg has a series of different rolls that we have to make with different dice, which will base our character and then give access to any kind of special luck, any type of equipment they're going to be carrying, etc., etc. So it really does give us, and is going to define the areas that we're going to have a look at in terms of what we need to come up with the character. So first off is the origin for our character. What class or what level or what archetype have we got to use to define the basis of our character? Well, there's a 8-sided roll that we have to make, and what we come up with was be a character that was once a driver from one of the big robots that's mentioned in the game. So that led me down the line of feeling like something like maybe a not too muscular orc, or maybe so like an orc which has large amount of power into upper arms from moving as a canopy with arms, etc., etc., but where the rest of the body is slightly wasting away and reliant on a power supply that it gets from actually being strapped into the big robot itself. Next was a random roll for a physical feature. Now with this, we were able to roll up a bionic part, and again randomly the 3 parts that we could get from here was an arm, a leg, or something to do with the jaw. Now we were lucky enough to come up with an arm, because I think that's one of the real key areas we could probably really go to town with in terms of the kit bashing and design we do for that. Finally, what the guy's armed with, what he's equipped with. Well, again, just having orcs run around with big guns is probably the archetype you would know from games like 40k, etc. But this is a game that's based on these orcs being on board, so like a derelict ship. So as such, big guns is not going to be the order of the day. And true to fact, when we rolled it up, we ended up with some kind of gruesome knife that the guy is going to be using. Again, maybe tying into that fact that once he was really strapped into one of these big robots, and the big robots was doing all the heavy work in terms of the fighting. So he had only just a personal defense weapon. Also equipment, a few bits and pieces that could go in to really add to the character of our model. One being a pair of what they call the shit kicker boots. So a big pair of, army boots with big hobtailed caps on them, right for the stomping of into any opposing or enemy fighter. He got rolled up a few grenades, so a few flame charges that you can use throughout the game for causing havoc. And the last one was what we'd call an orc prayer within the game, which is a special ability rather than an item. So that's not something that realistically we're going to be able to make use of in the aesthetic kit bash for the model. Now we've got the idea and the basic outline for what we need to include onto the model. It's time to decide which kits we're going to be using, which models we're going to make use of. And for this, it really falls down into 3 main areas that we're going to be using. First off, for the main part of the model, this is emaciated and quite thin orc. We're going to be using the Bone Rippers from Age of Sigmar. So those swamp type orcs that came out not too long ago. In line with that, to give them a bit more sci-fi feel and to nick various bits and pieces and greebies off, we're going to make use of the Kill Team Commandos. I think an awesome box for any kind of orc kit bash or various, rudimentary and fun and flavourful orc bits that you might want to make use of. And finally, the head. Now, one of the really prolific designers and manufacturers of orc bits is the company Cromlech. Now, from this, I've decided to use one of the heads because I've got a selection from previous builds that I did, and there's one that really ties in to that driver stroke pilot aesthetic of one of the big robots that we're going to go for this game itself. I'm going to show you how we put that together pretty much towards the end of the video. So first things first, where do we start? Well, we've always got to start with a solid base for our model to take any conversion off. And to me, the solid base is always the torso and the orientation of the legs. So we get that strong base in which to work with that really governs a lot of what the other stuff that goes onto the model is brought about by. So again, wanting to use one of these bone splitter models. So now we're going to stick it together using our top tip for this video, the use of sprue glue. Now, if anyone's not heard of sprue glue, basically what it is plastic glue that has bits of sprue already melted into it. So it's a liquid adhesive that's just on the way back to turning into solid plastic. As such, with model kits like the GW kits and a lot of other people who use plastic as their bases, it's a really good medium to use, not only as an adhesive, but also it can be used for filling gaps. It can be used for creating textures on models, etc., etc. And it is really the go-to medium in my mind whenever we're sticking plastic kits together. So once we've got that basis, then we need to get the first thing that we're going to check off our list, those shit kicker boots. Now, as such, this is where we're going to turn to one of the bodies from the Orc Commando box and try and take his boots off him and stick them on our bone splitter's frame, for want of other words. Now, a lot of the times people would go down the road of using a pair of cutters to get these boots off, but if we have a look at a lot of our cutters, especially the more expensive ones, we can see that they're not really designed to go something that's quite thick as the leg muscles that appear on this model, being in the range of no more than about 3mm. So as such, we're going to use basically the only tool we're going to use alongside our sprue glue. We're going to use a nice sharp hobby knife. Now with this, we're going to follow the line of the boot, and once we've made that initial cut in it, we're going to use a rocking action to try and break through as much of the material as possible before we apply some pressure to snap it off. Now both boots are done in the same way, just following the line of the boot itself. And then once we've got through it enough, a lot of the times it should break off easily following the rest of the line that we started to create. And it's no more than then just giving them a clean up again with our hobby knife, just to remove any excess bits that we don't want, before we have to go in and look at attaching it now to the legs of our bone splitters model. Again, just what we did before, using the hobby knife itself, and once we have got an idea about how and where these boots are going to sit, it's taking the lower leg off just before at the top of the calf on both legs and sticking our newly found shit kicker boots to the model itself. Now with this, we do have a little bit of drying time and do have a little bit of working time with the sprue glue, which is always nice. So that allows us to actually stand the model up and make sure that we can position the boots themselves, that they are as flat to the surface as possible. And I always think a good test of a good solid base is to see if the model will actually stand up on its own. If it does, we can tell that we've got some really good base foundation to work with for the rest of the model itself. Now next is going to be the arms, and we're going to put our armament of the big knife in the one hand. So again, this is taken from our Orc Commandos sprue itself, where we have got the ability for left and right arm on both sides. So as such, then I wanted to use a right hand sided arm this time, just because we've got a bit of ornament there towards the top of the shoulder. We can cut it off to like mid over the top half of the arm, and that way then we don't really have to worry about marrying up so much the shoulder joint itself. Now there is a bit of protrusion here, only slight, because again the muscular arm for the commando is not really deemed to be sitting in the base model that we've got. But this is all right because we're going to have to learn to deal with these things, like filling gaps, like overcoming like bits that are slightly mismatched. But I've always thought that kit bashing shouldn't be one of those things where you have to really go down the route of trying to be an extra fine sculptor. If you can hide it under something else, hide it under something else, because then you don't have to worry about it. So as such with that, what we're going to do is I'm going to use an extra piece of armour that I had lying around, just a curved plate, just off the bottom of the existing armour that's there and the top of the arm, to basically mask this joint between the two models. Because if your eye can't see it, then you're not going to be drawn to it at all. Now for the left hand arm, we're going to make use of this bionic part. And this is something that I'm going to bring up on every video going forwards. I'm going to have a random bit. And what I want to do, I want to see if I can challenge you to see if you know where this random bit comes from. What's the original kit that this orange plastic, what looks like a leg, is from? Can you identify it? If you can, please put it in the comments below, and I'll make sure I give kudos to whoever comes up with the first correct answer. I'm sure there's a lot of you who are already screaming at the screen that you know exactly what it is. So please come and join in and add your comments to the page. Now with this, because of the way that the leg is set up, it again doesn't really match the way I want my arm to sit on the model. Almost like the knee joint that was created is actually in the wrong direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the two parts again with my nice sharp hobby blade, and rotate the bottom half into the position where I'm happy that it's going to look more like a bionic arm than a bionic leg that's strictly put into another position. Once it's in position, I can start adding some claws to the model. Again, a few greebly bits that I've got hanging around. I believe one is from Necromunda kit, one of those automaton big beasts. It's like Amble type Necromunda models, and a couple of little bits as well that looks like more organic talons, but when they're painted up and when they're going to be silver, are going to look more like sculpted metal rather than anything. Now to the final bit that I choose to leave to the end of every model that I ever do, and that's the positioning of the head. Because I always think that you can't really truly position the head to make it look as seamless as possible with the model until you've got the rest of the body of the model in place. Because it's the orientation of the arms, it's the orientation of the shoulders, the waist, etc, etc. That's going to have a really dramatic effect on which way you position the head. And if you don't quite get it right, it can look a little bit out of place and a little bit just like it doesn't belong. So with the choice that we've got here, we've got a number of heads from Cromlech. Now I was lucky enough to buy these for another project some years ago. They come in a set of 10, so they've been lying around in bits box for ages. But these guys are really cool because they've got like the old school World War II flying caps on, the leather flying caps and the goggles. So I thought, what more do you need for a pilot of a big robot or a mech than someone who looks like he should be a pilot? So as such, we're going to use one of these heads for the model itself. Now I've got a choice of 4. So pretty much all it is to get some blue tack out and test fit the models in place. See what comes up, see what, what works, what doesn't work. Is the head too big, too long, etc, etc? Which way do the flaps on the cap, do they sit nicely on the model, or is it going to take some more work, etc, etc? But eventually, with the one of the 4 that I had available to me, I just say, yeah, that works. This guy's pretty much correct size, orientation looks good, and it looks good when it's attached to the model. So this is where we're going to go now with the head of the model. And once this is in place, then we're moving on to finishing the model off. For this, and again moving forward, we're going to make use of xenophil highlighting and slab chopping mixed together. So the first thing is to give it a spray of Colour Forge's Hyrax Brown, and then afterwards give it another spray of Ghoul Grey to bring those highlights out. And then once we're happy that we've hit all those areas, a final dry brush with Pro Acryl's Titanium White really brings out the absolute top level highlights that we're going to make use of, because a lot of this model is going to be painted using either Citadel contrast paints or the AK interactive speed paints. Now, I'm not a top line painter in any way, shape or form, but I do like to have nice colours available for the tabletop. So as such, the speed paints and the contrast paints are one of those things that I've really bought into in the last couple of years. Let's help to get a better definition on the table, rather than those armies of grey that you see and those models of grey that you always see now and again. But just something with a little bit more colour, especially when we're trying to add this model to tell some kind of story, is always going to be of benefit. So you can see that once we've got the model together in this guise, it really looks like it's a coherent design within the model. There's nothing really at this point that I'd choose to change. So it's all about getting some colour on, and let's see what we can do with this model itself. So hopefully you'd be happy with how this model has turned out. I know I very much am. I really enjoyed the process of having the constraints of the random rolls that the game actually gave me in terms of what I could do, what I had to include on the model, etc, etc. It got me thinking a little bit outside the box for various parts and the combination of various kits together. So for example, the Age of Sigmar alongside a more Warhammer 40k stroke kill team set is one of those ones that you don't normally see going together quite that often. But it's an Orc. At the end of the day, Orcs is probably one of the easiest sets to kitbash from, because literally you have no wrong move with an Orc. To be honest, the more janky, the more out of place, and the more ridiculous a bit or a aesthetic choice you make may be, the more Orc it becomes, because ridiculousness just goes out the window when we're talking about the war. So I hope you enjoyed this, our inaugural video and a look down towards our first model that we've created here on the channel. What I'd love to see going forwards is what you guys have created. What you guys have created for the Orktober celebrations, if you're into that. What you've designed and built and put together for your own RPG games, whether that be a character or a boss that your player characters need to fight against. I'd love to hear stories about, you know, these games and how having the model that truly represented you on the table added to or removed maybe from your gameplay, because again, this is the way I like to play, and maybe not everybody buys into the idea of having models on the table and would prefer theatre of the mind instead. Please go check out Orc Borg. Yeah, I really can't wait to try a game of this out with my friends. And again, if anyone's playing this and anyone wants to offer some suggestions, if anyone's got a spare sheet at the table going through, then I'd love to get my character a bit more on the table and be really freshing out sort of independent titles such as this. So till next time, again, thank you for watching. If you like what we do here on the channel and would like to support us again, our Patreon is now up and running. Please see the links in the description below. Or if you're not, you know, wanting to join in the channel and have access to the the private Discord, etc., and the potential for Kitbash competitions going along every month, then please just do us a little solid of a like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything to do that apart from a couple of clicks, and it would help us out massively. So thanks guys, thanks for watching, and I hope all your games, whether you play them from dungeons to starships, have been awesome.